Hi, it's Lulu, and this is Eric.
And I demand a recount.
This is the first video in a new series where I'm going to recount fun facts from the real lives of political figures to my partner, and they will react as necessary. Today's fun figure, our first one, is known for a particular piece of their work rather than for who they are as a person, and I wanted to dive into his life a little bit. Our subject today is Robert himself of Robert's Rules, the self-described foremost guide to parliamentary procedure in America, which is also used in some organizations in Canada. Eric, what do you know about Robert's Rules of Order?
Point of personal privilege.
Yeah.
It's about...
Let's fill in the gaps with some fun facts. So Robert's Rules were created by a man with not one, not two, but three first names. Henry Martin with a Y, Robert.
Oh good, his name isn't Robert.
Yes, his last name is Robert. But since that's what we know him by, that's mostly what we will call him during this video, Robert, to avoid confusion. Our story starts in May of 1837 in South Carolina, when Robert was born. Yes, the rules some organizations are still using to this day were conceptualized by an American born in 1837, 185 years ago.
Good.
And Henry Martin Robert was born in Robertsville, South Carolina.
No.
His father, who he inherited his three first names from, Joseph Thomas Robert, was a reverend with really strong opposition to slavery. And so he did not want to raise his family in South Carolina. He moved them to Ohio. His pops, Joseph Thomas Robert, actually later became the first president of Morehouse College. So the young Robert was raised in Ohio, and he was nominated as a teen for West Point, which I cannot describe better than the first sentence of West Point's Wikipedia page. The United States Military Academy, also known as West Point, or simply Army.
Good old, or the Army.
Or, no, not the.
Oh.
Simply Army. When Henry Martin Robert attended West Point, it was mainly less combat-based and more engineering-based. Most of the classes were focused on engineering, as they were trying to colonize a country, for heaven's sake, and they needed infrastructure for that. Now, he graduated in 1857, fourth in his class, something which is apparently important because everyone who went to West Point has what point in their class they were like first in the descriptions about them. He became a military engineer, and he later joined the Union Army in the Civil War. So there was one other Union soldier above him, there was one Confederate, and there was one turncoat who was originally in the Union Army, but you know,
And
he
decided to go to school with them?
well, when the state of Virginia left and joined the Confederacy, this guy also did, and he got his ass killed for it. That's what you get for being a Confederate. If you're curious about this academy's place in the Civil War, 294 graduates of West Point went on to be general officers in the Union Army during the Civil War, and 151 served in the Confederate Army. So considerably less Confederates, but still too many Confederates, in my opinion, for an academy.
We're a Jedi Academy. We pump out, how many is it?
Very similarly to the Jedi Academy, many graduates went on to do evil, heinous shit. Now, our Robert's first service was in an incredibly well-known war, which I'm sure you and everybody knows a lot of facts about already, but I am just going to summarize them just for the sake of those of us who do not. Sometimes called the San Juan Boundary Dispute, or the Northwestern Boundary Dispute, but more often called the Pig War, the Pig Episode, or the Pig and Potato War. Any guesses on how the Pig and Potato War started?
there was a lack of those and they went looking?
No. So the Pig War, for those of you who don't know for some absurd reason,
Weird.
was a very serious fallout of border ambiguity which began on June 15th, 1846, with the Oregon Treaty, which was meant to resolve ongoing trouble, decades-long trouble, of dispute between the US and the UK surrounding the 49th parallel border. 13 years later, to the day, on June 15th, 1859, the fighting began. The war. Can you guess what instigated the war? What specific incident?
Was it the pig or the potato?
Both.
Oh.
It was both. An American who had moved to the island
What came first?
to become a farmer. I actually don't know which of the two interested parties who initiated the Pig War were on the island first. If anybody knows that, please tell me in the comments. An American, Lyman Cutler, who moved to San Juan Island in an attempt to settle it. I'm sure no one lived there first. He was trying to run his farm, and the unthinkable happened one day. He discovered in his potato garden a pig. A feral hog, you might say.
Oh no.
Absolutely rampaging through his potatoes. So he did what any American would do, and he shot the pig dead. And the pig, in fact, belonged to Charles Griffin, who was an Irishman hired by the hideously colonial and genocidal Hudson's Bay Company to run pigs around this island, I guess.
Eating people's potatoes?
Well, it was part of an initiative about a sheep farm. I'm unclear about why the pigs needed to be there in the beginning. Again, if you know why they needed pigs on this sheep farm in 1859, please sound off in the comments, because I could not find like a legitimate explanation for the pigs being there. But regardless, the pig belonged to Charles Griffin, who was enraged that his pig had been shot dead.
Yeah.
Naturally, of course. Cutler offered to pay $10 for the pig. So $10 back then, something like $300 in our money today. And Griffin insisted he would take no lower than $100, which is about $3,000 in today's money. Cutler believed he should not have to pay for this pig because the pig was trespassing. I guess as a pig, the pig was expected to understand what
Property law.
trespassing is and private ownership. Exactly.
Yeah.
See, you're following.
Yeah.
You know.
When you don't get into Harvard and you're a pig, you deserve to eat it sometimes.
See? Now, anyways, there is an unconfirmed report of Cutler saying to Griffin, "It was eating my potatoes," and Griffin replying, "It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig." And this is what started the Pig War. British authorities threatened to arrest Cutler after ensuing community discord happened based upon this pig slaying. When British authorities threatened that arrest, the American settlers of the area called for military backup. 66 soldiers were sent to the island to prevent the British from landing and starting a war over a singular pig. And our boy Robert, of the Rules, whilst recovering from a fever that he had contracted in Panama on another assignment, was part of that illustrious mission. So the British dispatched 3 warships to meet them on the island. By August, 2 months later, about 450 American soldiers with 14 cannons built were posted up on the island, and 5 British warships sat in the bay. Robert, our boy Robert of the Rules, he was in charge of building the American Redoubt. It's like a temporary little fort on some high ground overlooking the bay. The British set up their own little fort sort of closer to the sheep farm. He was in charge of the Redoubt, and it's now known as Robert's Redoubt. And Robert's Redoubt is actually considered the best preserved fortification of its kind in the entire United States, testifying to the engineering prowess of our boy Robert.
So he's well-founded.
Well-founded.
Strong structures.
Now, in terms of actual war, When the British Rear Admiral in charge of the response to the Pig War, Rear Admiral Baines, arrived at the island, and he discovered that this was a suggested war over a singular pig. He said, "This is ridiculous. No, we're not having a war over this. Let's go fuck something else up." And that was pretty much the end of that. So the most important and enduring consequence of the Pig War seems to have been Robert's Redoubt. Well done, Robert. Still one of the only 2 landmarks on that island, the other of which is the British Redoubt from the Pig War.
Impressive, less well fortified.
Absolutely. Hardly even comparable, to be honest. Just closer to the sheep farm. So after his tremendously successful Redoubt and this very intensive and serious war experience, our boy Robert moved on to build some more wildly successful structures. He served in the Civil War under Major General Silas Casey, who graduated 39th out of 41 in his class at Westport, which must have been kind of a weird dynamic.
Kind of like a reflection. He was like,
Yeah.
I was 4th best and I was 3rd worst.
Our boy Robert's projects included fortifications in Washington, D.C., which clearly they needed since it was previously not that hard to march in there and burn down the White House. And he also worked on fortification for a bunch of New England ports and harbors. He worked in Green Bay and Michigan and Philadelphia and New York and all Long Island, all of these places. And he also worked constructing locks and dams on the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers, which, since all the texts about him don't bother mentioning the effects of, I'm sure wasn't destructive at all to local indigenous folks or the environment.
No. They would have written about that. That would have been very, very well documented, right?
While he was working on all these things, he rose in the ranks of the Union Army, and he became the president of the Board of Engineers from 1895 to 1901. Later in his life, his big final project there was studying how to deepen the southwest pass of the Mississippi River, which again, I'm sure didn't cause any problems for indigenous folks or any environmental disruption at all.
No, the catfish loved it.
Please, environmental engineers, describe the damage that Robert did to the rivers below. I would love to hear about it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it in my initial fact finding. Now, Robert also chaired a board of engineers. That board of engineers, and this was right near sort of the end of his working life, designed the Galveston seawall following the disastrous hurricane in Galveston in 1900. And every time there was sort of another storm, he was called back to the seawall to evaluate damage and see if he could learn any more engineering stuff. He was a very well-respected engineer. It seems like the structures he worked on as an engineer were pretty steadfast. On April 30th, 1901, he was tombstone promoted. Any guesses what that means?
Oh, someone died and he got the job, right?
I love that, but no.
Oh.
A tombstone promotion, I don't know if this is true in other armies. I didn't look it up. But in the American Army, a tombstone promotion is a promotion given at retirement. So, on April 30th, 1901, he was promoted to Brigadier General. Good job, Robert, again. And he was promoted to the Chief Engineer of the Union Army. And then 2 days later, on May 2nd, 1901, he retired.
So that was more of did they know he was gonna? Okay.
Fascinating.
You get this in peace?
Yeah, exactly. Now, okay, so pigs and potatoes and rivers and port fortification aside, you may be asking yourself, and it would be fair, how did this guy end up being the foremost dictator of legislative procedure in the US and Canada? Do you have a guess?
But he was on a board.
Incredibly enough, the rules happened before he served on the Board of Engineers.
But he used them while he was on that board.
He sure did. He sure did. Now, the first version of Robert's Rules of Order
He was a small boy, 10.
They were published in 1876 with the title The Pocket Manual of Rules of Order for Deliberative Assemblies. Now, our boy decided to undertake this pocket manual for personal reasons. Do you have any guesses why?
Because collaborative group meetings are a mess if there's no rules.
You know what? I'm going to say that's true. That is kind of the reason.
Your boy sounds cranky and wanted to get things done.
You know, he was actually seen as a gentle-hearted, moral, and upstanding man. He was a man of deep faith. And that actually plays into why the rules ended up being created.
Don't tell me God told him to do it.
No.
Okay.
I have not found that written. Please, if you have found any quotes in your political experiences of our boy Robert saying he created these rules after God told him to, please tell me in the comments. I would love to add that to these facts. Unfortunately,
he was the original Blues Brother.
The original mission from God, was in 1876 in America. Oh God, I need another drink. While stationed in New Bedford, when he was 25 years old, at the young age of 25, he faced a great challenge, his greatest challenge yet. He was like a staunch, lifelong Baptist. Remember I said his dad was a reverend. And he was tasked by surprise to chair a meeting at the local Baptist church where the congregation was concerned about the physical defenses of the church. Now, he was in town. He was like the Union's greatest structural defensive engineer. And so naturally, he was tasked with chairing the meeting because he knew the most about the thing, and that's always who's best at chairing a meeting, right?
Oh yeah, that's always the case.
He absolutely tanked. Yeah, he sucked at chairing. It was a disaster.
Weird.
An actual fist fight broke out, and nothing got done. Later, he wrote, and this is a direct quote: "One can scarcely have had much experience in deliberative meetings of Christians without realizing that the best of men, having wills of their own, are liable to attempt to carry out their own views without paying sufficient respect to the rights of their opponents." And he was so embarrassed by how poorly he did when he was faced with that hard truth about Christian men with wills of their own in this church meeting, he set out to never have that happen to him again. So he made a promise to himself that before the next meeting he would learn about legislative process from the people who are widely accepted to be the most efficient and effective process movers of all time, and not at all as one of the most oppressive institutions in history.
Yeah.
The United States Congress.
Right.
He wanted to help. He wanted to make it so people like himself, forced to, by surprise, chair meetings, would be able to do so without trouble and fist fights. The fist fight was particularly embarrassing to him. Now, he set out to write a simple and relatable 16-page guide to managing procedure. How do you think that went for him?
At page 16, he was like, oof, I need some more pages.
Yeah, so the first edition of the Pocket Manual, a manuscript he mostly wrote.
Pocket. I'm excited
manual.
I'm excited for the number of pages, how big your pockets are.
He mostly wrote this manuscript actually while he was snowed in during a bad winter, so don't ever let anyone tell you that being snowed in is bad. The first edition was 176 pages long.
176?
Yes. It was only 160 pages longer than he intended it to be.
It's supposed to be 16 pages, right?
Indeed.
And it's 160 more.
160 more pages. Yeah. So it was 176 pages
so
at the time of its first edition.
Like more than 10 times its initial.
Do you have any guesses about how long the most recent one is?
Should we just throw out the multiply by 10 again?
Although that would be fun. The edition of Robert's Rules that is mostly used in practice now, the 12th edition, contains 633 pages of text.
Pocket manual.
Would that it were 16 still. It is reported to include everything in there because, and again, I quote, it has at some time come up as a question of procedure somewhere. Anything that has come up as a question of procedure gets added to the rules, the pocket manual, which obviously at a certain point had to stop being called the pocket manual. So Robert published the rules of order after he had worked for a while on the board of directors for the Baptist Church in San Francisco.
And it was working for me, so why not?
And with organizing committees of the YMCA. Which I actually didn't know was that old. So both these organizations had incredibly bad governance, and the Y in particular, on account of there were people across disciplines, and so meeting chairs were challenged like constantly in meetings of the YMCA. And there was no real procedure to handle that, which of course sort of messes up your meetings, as some of us know.
Yeah.
From various political proceedings that we may or may not be involved with.
Wait, you're saying that there is written rules about what to do if the chair is put into question?
Yes, and I'm sure you've seen them expertly followed in various circumstances. Now, the stated purpose for the pocket manual when it was published was to make in only 16 or 176 pages the rules and practice used in proceedings of the United States Congress, straightforward and functional, to be used in non-legislative societies. The pocket rules of order were turned down by 2 publishers, so he self-published it. He went to a private printer and bought 4,000 copies and distributed them. Again, self-publishing. Imagine the reach you can have as a self-publisher, knowing that our boy Robert, who we all know the work of, started self-published. I think that's inspiring. These copies were, of course, small enough to fit in your pocket.
Really?
Tiny little pages. Incredibly small text. It was meant to be convenient, so that if you were ever stuck chairing a church meeting by surprise, you could pull out your little pocket manual and not have to worry about how the proceedings would go. So he sent them around to a bunch of people, and he eventually got them picked up pretty broadly. Obviously, we're in Canada, and we are part of organizations that use the modern day version of Robert's Rules to this day. Obviously, they eventually picked up steam because they made much more clear a sort of set of rules and guidelines that were like less based in petty disputes and more streamlined than the rules that were kind of currently common around governance bodies at the time. Robert actually published 4 editions of the manual before his death, and the last revision he made was the expanded 4th edition, which was published by that point he had given up on the pocket-sized part of it. So the 4th edition was published as Robert's Rules of Order Revised, and that was published in May of 1915 by an actual publishing house, which was founded by an elementary school teacher, Scott Forsman. So Scott Forsman and Company in Chicago actually published the last sort of living edition of Robert's Rules.
So, considering that the 4th edition was the first one that was actually distributed, is that considered first edition at that point?
This is not true. So the second...
Oh, wait, I mean, he was distributing, but
He personally distributed the first edition. The second edition was...
less well received.
It was published by, like, an actual publisher. He still wasn't thrilled with it. It was just that he had realized that his initial 176 pages... weren't sufficient, which of course those of us who are involved in politics know. Obviously 176 pages is not enough. The second edition was sort of his first revisions, which he had done in order to achieve like an actual publisher. And then from there, it was sort of, he just sort of sent it around. Having been very successful during the war, he was able to sort of get the ear of various folks in government and the army, and so he was able to distribute his rules. And like I said, look, a lot of the proceedings of these organizations was run, they're based on like petty rivalries and just slightly less functional things than these rules. And so when people actually got a hold of them and started reading them, they figured, hey, this is totally going to streamline it and make it super simple and easy and won't cause any problems at all. Again, I try not to begrudge these folks for thinking that in the beginning. If you have a different opinion of Robert's rules, again, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your opinion of Robert's rules and the impact they have had on your own political participation or participation in other non-legislative societies.
Maybe you're a church group.
Maybe you're a church group and Robert's Rules of Order are still used. I actually am not sure how many Baptist churches still use Robert's Rules of Order. It's kind of hard to find data on that. It's not something people are actively studying right now, which is a real shame. Robert died in 1923, aged 86, in New York, actually. And after he died, his estate went on revising and publishing, and that led to the sort of editions of Robert's Rules that we have now. But that's not what this video is about. This is about Robert himself. Now, I found this and this just delighted me. In 1954, a pilgrimage by a well-known organization occurred. Our boy Robert is buried in Arlington, and I wonder if you can guess what organization made a little pilgrimage to his grave, and they laid a wreath and they made a big ceremony about it in 1954.
1954. Did Westboro exist back then?
Oh gosh, no.
I don't know.
No, I don't think that...
I don't know.
What would the Westboro Baptist Church think of Robert's Rules of Order?
It's giving everyone a voice, so I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I don't think they'd be thrilled about it, to be honest.
No. Takes away their ability to like talk over you and stuff.
It was not a church group.
Oh.
A pilgrimage of Toastmasters International.
Oh, Toastmasters.
Absolutely.
Why did I not think it was them? Of course.
Of course. Toastmasters International led a sort of procession in 1954 to the grave of our boy Robert of the Rules, led by the Toastmaster founder himself, Ralph Smedley.
No.
Yes. Smedley, who I feel like I may one day learn some facts about. Smedley said of our boy Robert, he probably has done more for public-minded people who are interested in orderly meetings than anyone else in the world. And that's a really memorable quote for me, as someone who has been subjected to Robert's Rules of Order a number of times. Absolutely. I think it's delightful that a U.S. Army engineer has dictated the way that organizations and groups, certainly across North America, have governed themselves and managed meetings. I don't know if we can harp on his original intentions, sure. Because what Robert hoped and dreamed was that there was this worthy sort of general will that would emerge in democratic proceedings as soon as members could just slice through those superficial procedural issues. And he figured that his rules would help to clearly and easily slice through those just, surface level procedural issues. Now, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers historians, and probably anyone who's ever been in an NDP council or convention, would testify to the fact that the way Robert's rules have functioned since this dream of his has sort of challenged his optimism, and that might be evident in the fact that the rules are now more than 600 pages long, which is certainly larger. I mean, with technology, just throw it on your phone. As a book, you can no longer fit it in your pocket, so it's kind of outlived its original purpose. For better or for worse, people in English-speaking politics, they know this guy's work. So what's your favorite thing you learned about Robert today?
My favorite thing I learned about was the pig and potato war. I don't know if that's about Robert specifically. I also just remembered that Robert's name wasn't Robert, and that's probably my favorite Robert fact. Yeah. We've been talking about this guy.
His last name is Robert. It's not like it came from nowhere.
I get this, but like...
He was born in Robertsville.
Yeah, it's the born in Robertsville also is some nonsense. That one's not allowed. It's an illegal fact. I do also wish to bring up the fact that we could, in theory, create a Robert's Pants of Order, which in its pocket contains the 600-page manuscript of Robert's current Rules of Order. Just a big, big old pocket.
I actually think that would be preferable to the way that these rules are currently used in proceedings, but that's why I'm not in charge of proceedings. I'm thrilled to know that other things are also named after Robert. His Redoubt, for example.
I like that. I like that his friend was so like his friend with a ridiculous name.
They were not friends.
Oh no, they weren't friends. Who is Ralph to him?
Yeah.
Ralph doesn't know him. Right.
Gotta be real. Ralph Smedley did not know our boy Robert personally.
He talks about him like he did.
The Toastmasters
right.
organization uses Robert's Rules of Order. And so I guess for that organization, at the time of 1954, during the Toastmasters pilgrimage to Robert's grave, I guess the Toastmasters had been served really well by Robert's Rules of Orders, and I cannot begrudge them for that, because any organization that found comfort in these rules, I think, should be congratulated for getting through all the rules and having them work, especially since that was long before 1954.
Yeah, which version?
That was long before the 12th edition, so they didn't even have 633 pages. So the fact that already, without those additions, those rules served the Toastmasters so well, I think that is really a testament to the enduring structures that Robert was able to build, much like Robert's Redoubt. But in any case, I hope that you learned some fun facts about Robert himself, because honestly, I really think we get into these halls of discussion and we ask, how do Robert's rules work? And we never ask, how was Robert?
How was he?
And it seems like he was pretty successful. Honestly, apart from the fever he got in Panama that one time, and the fact that he started a fist fight by accident the first time he ever tried to chair a meeting.
Who hasn't?
So based just on that, I'm curious to know what people think of Robert himself. You know, he was a real person, a real lock and dam building and river deepening person. I just think it's neat that we're still using the rules of this guy born 185 years ago in America to govern our democratic processes, even up here in Canada in the year of 2022. So I hope you learned some fun facts. I hope any of you who are engaging in a political process anytime soon remember these fun facts about Robert while Robert's rules are being used against you. If you have any other fun facts about Robert, I don't care so much about the rules because I don't think there's going to be space in the comments for 633 pages. If you have a favorite fun fact that you learned today about Robert of the rules, let us know. We'll be fascinated to hear it. We'll see. Like and subscribe so that one day, 185 years from now, my work too will still be used in parliamentary procedure.